welcome you back to the show, sir. Welcome.
Steve, how are you?
Doing great. How interesting is it always to be around the Deion Sanders show when he gets the opportunity and the world gravitates toward him?
I'm kind of done with him in that's what I wrote yesterday, sort of like, okay, now we have a track record. Going 27-6 at Jackson State is one thing. Great, FCS. 4-8, at one of the greatest Septembers ever, but then lost the last 6, went 4-8. At some point, substance is going to have to overcome flash. So, and that'll come real quick. His players yesterday were his son, Shedeur Sanders, at Big 12 Media Day, where I just came back from, was saying everybody that plays us, it's their Super Bowl. Really? 4-8? Not quite. So, he's going to have, at least in the eye of public opinion, I'm not speaking for Colorado fans, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
4-8 is not going to cut it.
4-8 makes you the homecoming game. All right.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, like, we're everybody's big game. No, you're the homecoming game.
Right.
But Brett Yormark, who is aggressive, flamboyant at times, where does he stand on where the Big 12 is, and how closely does he take a look at the ACC situation?
Oh, I think he was purposefully saying on Tuesday, we're open for business again. We are clearly the third best conference. That was a shots fired at the ACC. I think he's willing to do anything and everything, from Florida State as a single to whatever's left of the ACC if Florida State finds a home, which, by the way, they don't have. That's one of the biggest questions going forward. They desperately want out. I think they're going to get out. It's just a matter of a monetary negotiation. But I've talked to several people. They don't have a home. The Big Ten doesn't want them. The SEC doesn't want them. The Big 12 would take them. But I think the fans would revolt if that means anything. But, it's going to be interesting.
It is going to be interesting because when I was down in Florida speaking to a couple of Penn State groups, I was asked about expansion again. And I said to the group, and I knew where it was coming from. I was speaking in Florida, so I knew we were talking about Florida State. And I said, don't you want to see how 18 works? I mean, there are logistical nightmares with making – nobody's made 18 work yet because nobody's had 18 yet. And I think that's something that people don't take into account. You have to figure out how to make it work first.
Yeah, no, I think that's how those commissioners feel. At some point, and my slide told me this long ago, the late, great SEC commissioner, Mike Slice, that once you get past 16, it's not even a conference anymore. You're just taking care of a corporation. And I think I figured out with 18 teams, each team misses 7 of its conference mates every year. So you can, random scheduling, you can end up with the toughest schedule on earth, which Florida has these next 2 years, or have a real easy schedule and win 11. It's just a roll of the dice. So yeah, they got to see how this works. Travel, don't forget the minor sports are involved here too. And I know in the case of the Big Ten, I don't know if they've, had a concrete discussion about it. They're just going to let them, travel 3,000 miles to play games. I did a note earlier this year, real quick. UCLA football, because they're playing, at Hawaii, at LSU, Big Ten, will travel not the equivalent of 92% of the distance around the earth. Yeah. Cal will travel 89%. Right. If anybody cares. Right. I don't think they do, but if anybody cares.
Right.
What about the students?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that the amount of travel they'll have to do. And, for example, the longest trip is not Rutgers to Los Angeles, it's Rutgers to Seattle. And people don't take that into account. Rich Clark, who's now the new head of the College Football Playoff Committee, was talking about and I think he was talking about logistics, but he was talking about hosting a college football playoff game, and he brought up weather, he brought up hotels, and he brought up ticket sales. What do you think he meant by that? Was it a logistical comment? Was it a comment against the group of five? What was your interpretation?
I wasn't there for his availability at the Big 12. I was in with Dion with a network interview, not monitoring him, but I will get with him. But I think what he meant was, and I'll just give you the example here. Kansas, it's already been, I don't know if it's been written or not, but Kansas and Northwestern are the only two schools in the country that have scheduling conflicts with the CFP. And, you know, who cares? Northwestern, who cares? Kansas? Well, for Kansas, at least that could happen.
Yeah.
They play their game. They play their home games. Their home games this year at Arrowhead Stadium, or the Chiefs play, or Billy Lee Stadium.
Right.
If they somehow got into the playoffs, they would absolutely have to play in that single game on December 20th, a Friday night, because the Chiefs play the next day against, I want to say, the Ravens.
Yeah.
And that would be the only time they could play. And there's going to be more of that as we go through this. There are things you don't see, but I think he was talking about that. By the way, early returns on this guy, unbelievable. Plugged in, great ideas.
All right.
Thought things that you and I sit down with him. I think he's great.
Hey, good. That's good to hear, because I haven't had a chance to ever talk with him, so that's good to hear. You talked about parity in the Big 12 being the potential strength for it. What was the sense you got from the coaches as to how closely grouped near the top some of those schools may be football-wise?
Well, since they haven't played yet and they lost Texas and Oklahoma, I think you've got the answer. We don't know yet. Utah's favored, and they should be. I think Utah's going to be a national power to come out of this league. But that's my opinion. But right now, it's Utah, Kansas State, Oklahoma State. Any of them could win. And my point in that story that just got posted this morning, I think.
Yes.
My point in that story is that these 16 teams are like the island of misfit toys, and I mean that in a good way, because they are 16 teams that nobody wants realignment right now. And I mean that in a good way, which means security.
That's right.
Which means they can build something. You know, it's not the conference it was without Texas and Oklahoma, but hey, look at Oklahoma State, where Mike Gundy's been there 19 years and won 166 games, or Utah. Kyle Whittingham they're one of the most physical teams in the country. Could play in the SEC or Big Ten easily, I think.
Oh yeah.
That's gonna be a good story. So that's what I meant like that. And the bigger picture, it's gonna be fun to see who comes out of there, because somebody's got to win that league, and whoever wins it is going to be in the playoff playing for a championship, and that team probably has never done anything like that before. Utah hasn't. Kansas certainly hasn't. Kansas State hasn't. That's going to be fun.
Yeah, and of course I did the Rose Bowl with Utah, and I saw enough tape. They play like a Big Ten team, and they've got a quarterback with the guts of Cam Rising. Was he in his 17th, 18th year? No, I'm just kidding. I know.
7th, yeah.
7th year. I know.
He's 7th. Steve, he's so old. Remember the big story last year where Utah players all got pickups?
Yes.
Wasn't that Utah?
Yes, it was Utah.
It was Utah.
Yeah.
He's so old and plugged in on NIL. He's got his own better car deal. He doesn't need the deal where every player on the team gets a car. He told me that yesterday. He's got his own deal.
I think he has his own mortgage, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Oh. How interesting is this month for you? Because, I mean, it's a month of interviews and getting everybody plugged in. But how interesting is it for you, considering that all the conferences get out there at the same time in a spread-out way to get their messages out?
Well, one, it's exhausting. Nobody cares about that, though.
I do.
Because Big 12, SEC, Big 10 in succeeding weeks. I did set a personal record Tuesday, Wednesday, 3 conference media days, 30 total teams, 22% of FDS. in 2 days, and that included last night's Oregon State, Washington State open bar, happy hour, media day with the Bees and Cougs.
There you go. Very
Pac-12.
nice. Very nice. Pac-12 style, and very easy to get to everybody. There's two of them.
Yeah. That's when you're renting a room at the Bellagio. That was easy to get to.
Yeah. Now, as you mentioned, that was in Las Vegas as well. But Las Vegas has been, because the Pac-12 is no longer really in business except for the two schools. Did Yormark send a message by getting the Big 12 Media Day in Las Vegas?
No, that had nothing to do with that. He loves Las Vegas. I think one day he wants to move the championship game there.
Yeah.
He thinks that he'll get more attention there. I'm speaking for him. I don't necessarily agree, but that was that. Yeah, last year it was interesting. Deion Sanders didn't show up last year in Vegas for the Pac-12 Media Day, but he did for his new league.
Well, in fact, that's what was actually what I was alluding to, the message part. Hey, we'd like to have the championship game here one day. I mean, that's...
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I do. It's here. I'm back home in Kansas City. It's a tradition here, and he personally really likes it. I don't think he's going to move it anytime soon, but I do think... And Dallas has been great, but Las Vegas, he loves the glitz. He loves he loves the showgirls, because he had showgirls meeting us as greeters. The unwashed media coming in.
Big Ten has a couple of security guys.
Right. Yeah. Where's your ID?
Yeah, exactly. He's got showgirls.
Right.
They got the two guys Rodney Dangerfield brought over in Caddyshack to get money from Ted Knight.
Yeah. Hey, Rocco, help the doctor find his watch.
And on that note, that's the mic drop.
That's it.
That's it. Dennis, we will talk later. Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Steve.
Dennis Dodd, CBS Sports.
Well, I mean, that's true. That's true. He's a slouch. He's no good. But unfortunately, you're making me pine for a year of many years ago. Put it that way. Those days are long gone. 4 handicap. Come on.
Okay. I admire your humility. All right, so you've done a series of lengthy interviews with a lot of people. Let's start at the top, and that is Pat Kraft, the Vice President for Intercollegiate Athletics. A lot of talk about Beaver Stadium, a lot of talk about what to do with $22 million. What were your primary takeaways that were answers that you sat back and went, okay, that's something to think about?
Yeah. So I think the first is with Beaver Stadium, you kind of had this conversation that was happening in the public sphere, including with the Board of Trustees meeting that happened on May 21st, where they obviously approved the final, 90% of the funding to move forward with the project. And effectively, they had 3 options, right? One was roughly $200 million just to keep the stadium outstanding. Just to have it up to code, all of those things. Deferred maintenance is kind of the buzzword there, but it really would not have added a whole lot, beyond that. No, the bells and whistles would not have been there. And then, he acknowledged another option, which was a new stadium, right? A new build, which they came in with. I think the number was $2 billion.
Yes,
right, give or take.
I think it's like it's like $2.2 billion.
Yes, and so, but the issue with that is, and he acknowledged this. It's not just $2.2 billion. Yes, that is an astronomical number to begin with, but it's also the debt servicing on it. Puts it over the lifespan of 30 years. At something like $3.7 billion-ish. So it effectively acknowledged that it was cost prohibitive for Penn State to go down that road, which leads you to what they did land on. And this was really the whole point of the interview. For me, why I sought to set it up was I don't know that the public has a full grasp of how Penn State, one, utilizes Beaver Stadium currently, and two, envisions its use in the future. And basically, the acknowledgement is, okay, this is a building that if you look at all of the revenues that come into Penn State Athletics, this is a building that is host to 70% of it, 80% of it, right? It's an astronomical number in terms of the revenues that Penn State has control over that go through that building. They have an opportunity to do that at a much greater scale, a much bigger scale, with what they're doing with the renovation. They envision this as a multi-use facility that will have opportunities to be filled effectively daily. Right? It's not just football. The football piece of it is massive. You are adding suites. You are adding, right, like effectively owners' boxes that, right, founders' boxes, loge boxes, you name it. There's going to be a ton of those dollar figure amenities for that crowd. But there's also going to be a ton of seats, right? I mean, there's a market there for football that is not currently being fulfilled with the current offerings of the stadium that they envision, having success moving forward.
There's another side element to it as well. If athletics wants to host something in a building,
yep,
the Jordan Center is not an option because they have to pay rent when they do that. If they host something at Beaver Stadium, or they are able to procure a conference that's going to take place in that west side of Beaver Stadium, it is athletics that actually reaps the benefit financially of doing something like that.
100%. It feels small in scale when you're talking about a $700 million project, but there's people don't grasp it. I didn't even necessarily grasp it, but weddings, conferences, expos, right? Like you name it, the number of opportunities for this large scale multi-use facility space, it will be there. Right? It is something that, one, currently doesn't exist in the state college market, and two, is something that they really feel strongly has an avenue for, creating revenues on top of all of the additional revenue opportunities, right? You almost have to put it into buckets, right? Because in one bucket, yes, football is huge. That event itself, those 7 Saturdays a year, those are huge. And then on top of that, you're going to have the one-offs, right? That's a second bucket, is the World Cup qualifying, NHL Winter Classic, you name it, these things that they believe they can be competitive in drawing into Beaver Stadium and having these events, Luke Combs concerts. And then the third is what's actually kind of the bread and butter of this, this underlying, hey, there's going to be a welcome center for new students. There's going to be this massive 40,000 square foot space that they can do many more things than the stadium currently offers them the capacity to do.
Okay. And I'd say what of the 630 they're getting, about 200 to 220 of that is actually back maintenance. I think that's a fair number, right?
Yeah, I think so. Look, anywhere between high ones and low twos.
Right. Okay. So now the next part of it is the James Franklin conversation. He's going to talk more at Big Ten Media Days coming up in a couple of weeks. But what is the vibe that he's getting from his football team that really only a head coach can get?
Yeah, that's a good question. Certainly, I think improved morale. Look, last year wasn't great when it came to that, I think is a fair way to put it. This was a program that had high expectations, high hopes, and really, it wasn't just that they lost to Ohio State and Michigan. It was the way they lost, right? This lack of hope almost is, right? I don't want to be too dramatic about this, but it was deflating, right? Andy Kotelnicki has changed that. There are positive vibes, good things from Andy Kotelnicki, Tom Allen, Justin Lustig, right things to feel good about and optimistic about really throughout the roster. That said, and something that I think was a very important takeaway from the interview is leadership is a thing for this team. Right? Whether or not they can fulfill and have strong leaders, and how it takes shape. Right? Last year, kind of the narrative was, you might not have the level of Sean Clifford, P.J. Mustipher, or Tig Brown, but you do have 15 guys who can set an example and kind of carry that weight collectively. And this is me kind of reading between the lines here, but I don't think he likes that. Right? I don't think that's what they're looking for. I think they want stronger leadership. I think he's putting it on the players, has been since January, February, to say, look, like this is uncomfortable in how you guys carry yourself, right? Nick Singleton doesn't want to act like that. Drew Allard doesn't, right? These are nice kids. Even Nick Dawkins, right? The stronger guys that they have, Nick Dawkins. But you've got to be, he needs more. He needs more of that. The program needs more of the tough love kind of vibe, right? The hey, you can't be slacking, keep up. These are the goals of the team, and everyone has to buy into them and be 100% on board and understand your roles. But all of those different facets that I think sometimes we make fun of a little bit because it buys into the movie theme, right, of how sports work. Right. But no, they're like that. That's there. That's an element that has to exist. They have to have some of that to have success, and I think he's putting it on those guys to be more forceful about the leadership that they have this offseason.
Well, in other words, you have to have the guy that looks around and says, look, this isn't good enough, and be powerful about it. I mean, that's what he's talking about. Right, it's one thing to have people pat you on the back when it goes great, but when things aren't right, or it's 2.5 hours into a Wednesday practice, and guess what? You're tired. You better meet the standard, and I'm going to be the one to tell you, oh, by the way, I'm meeting the standard first.
Yep. And this lends into it, but talking to Drew Allard, right, which was another one of these interviews.
That'll be the next one to bring up.
Yeah, I mean, perfect segue. He pointed out KJ Winston as one of those guys who I don't know that I've heard a lot of publicly, right, to this point in his career. Yeah, great kid, is a heck of a player and has huge things in front of him this season, but I don't know that he's been discussed by teammates in the terms that Drew described, right, as a guy who will do all of the things that you just talked about, right, setting that example, being that forceful leader, and being willing to be unliked. It's not about being so aggressive that you want people to not like you. It's that you're saying, hey, these are the right things to do, and I don't care whether you like it or not. Like that's the vibe that they've got to have more of, and I think he's one of those guys that delivers that.
Well, Drew has a personality, but I will say this. When he became the starting quarterback last year, the area he kept trying to personally lead and bond with was the offensive line. And I felt that was important. Everybody's giving answers about the wide receivers. What answers did the quarterback and the head football coach and the offensive coordinator give you about the wide receivers?
Yeah. So I think it's important to represent all of it, okay? And so Andy Kotelnicki, on one end of the spectrum, Andy Kotelnicki was unabashedly defensive in favor of the receivers, right? Saying, look, they got a bad rap last year that wasn't deserved to the extent that people believed, and they're going to do much better this year. They are going to be put in positions. It is his responsibility to put them in the positions to have success. The personnel that they have there, right? I mean, there was no gray area. It was the receivers are going to have an excellent season. They're going to surprise some people, and this is how they're going to do it. Drew Aller was in the same vein, I would say, talking about 10 times ahead of where they were in the spring right now. And look, I'll cut through this. There was some subtweeting of Keandre Lambert-Smith, right? Not even needing to bring his name up into the conversation, but hey, if you look, what's the difference, right? What's the difference in that room between spring ball and now? And when the overall conversation from Kotelnicki, Drew Aller, and James Franklin all aligns in the sense of the vibe is better, that there is better leadership, it is a more focused group, they're saying something without saying it. And that is that Keandre Lambert-Smith was not conducive to really the health of that room. And then the last thing that I think is very important is, for as complimentary and optimistic as Kotelnicki and Drew Aller were, James Franklin said very plainly, yes, steps taken, good things, have to be better. Right? Not just going on the glow side, saying, hey, this is a group that still has to be better. And right, it is incumbent upon them to deliver, because if they don't, Penn State won't be able to reach the goals that it has as a program this season.
Right. This is where they do the 7-on-7 work. This is obviously the workout time as well. What vibe did you get from Drew Aller about how he feels the 7-on-7s have gone, since he has to work with everybody on an everyday basis, and he and Bo have to lead that?
Yeah, good. Right. I mean, I do think that again, I'm paraphrasing obviously here, but he talked about buy-in and saying that it's the best that it's been since he said since he's been here, but I think what he meant is his time as the starter, right? So dating back to 2 Januaries ago, since then, the buy-in is as good as it has been, and he's encouraged by that. Again, I think that it was a real question last year. You don't need... I think sometimes we get this perception as though mass mutiny is... Right, like what kind of happens within a football program where, okay, they're disaffected and they're giving up and they don't try. It's not that. It's not that. It's that if you got 5 guys who aren't doing the right things, being the right way, it can impact everybody.
No question.
It can be a low percentage that has a wide, broad impact. And when Drew Aller says, yeah, the buy-in is as good as it's been, I think that carries weight. I think that grabbed my attention as to, okay, this is a purposeful comment to indicate the guys in the team, the guys in this program are doing the right things, believe in the plan, are not, kind of locker room lawyering their way through the off season. And again, that's a optimistic element for this program to have going into training camp here later this month.
No question about that, because I know James Franklin, when he's talked with donors, he talks about pulling the rope in the same direction. Well, that's the daily basis of a football team. You have to have all 124 guys pulling the rope in the same direction, and it just can't be about, I need to make sure that this works for me.
Yep. No, 100%. It is one of his biggest mantras, right? Philosophies, right? Having this unity of mission. And that is incredibly hard to do with 125 guys between the ages of 18 and 23. It's just hard to do that, but you have to be purposeful in setting the climate and the culture within the program to achieve that as best as you can. And it's gonna vary. And every program knows this. It will vary from year to year how well you're able to achieve that based on kind of the unique personality that teams take. But again, I'm witnessing this. Again, this is my perception, but I'm seeing this delicate balance of, yes, things are better and things are taking strides. It is not a rubber stamp that everything's hunky-dory, right? It is that call for leadership is a signal to say, hey, there's still room to grow and to get better and to further these foundations. I would describe it as maybe like a cautious optimism that they are doing the right things that will put them in place to be competitive this fall.
These are all answers we'll actually get when they start playing games, but in the off season, it's interesting to talk about. All right,
100%. We got one of the funny things for me was asking Drew about. Look, his next shot at Ohio State is November 2nd.
Yep.
Right, and that's everything about last year was about those two games. Mm-hmm. Michigan's not on the schedule this year, and you don't get Ohio State until the beginning of November. That is a wide. You just don't get to put yourself back in that opportunity. No. Now they have to take care of a ton of business before they get to that point for that point to matter. But this narrative arc is so drawn out. It's about what he does in this space right now that will put him in the position to succeed when that comes. But again, you don't get to experience it again until a year later.
Well, you get to experience the golf course in just a short period of time. So.
All right. I hope so.
You're the best. Thanks so much for the time, as always, Nate.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.